No one came to celebrate the 80th birthday of Evelyn Hawthorne, the once vibrant matriarch of the Hawthorne family. Her children had long since grown distant, lost in their busy lives, leaving her to sit alone, candles flickering on a cake that would never be cut. Months later, as her children gathered to mourn her passing, they were left reeling by the contents of her will, a gift none of them expected, a revelation none could forget. Evelyn Hawthorne had always been a strong woman, the kind who built her life around family, tradition, and love. She had grown up in a small village, married her childhood sweetheart, and raised 3 children in a modest but cozy home. Her children, Catherine, Edward, and Sarah, had all been her pride and joy. As they grew up, they each pursued different paths in life, but Evelyn had always assumed that no matter where they went, family would remain their anchor. Yet, as the years passed, the visits grew sparse, and the phone calls became rare. Catherine, the eldest, was a successful lawyer in a bustling city, married with 2 children of her own. Edward, the middle child, had taken up a position as a financial analyst in a distant country, always too busy to fly home. Sarah, the youngest, was an artist, floating through life, often unreachable. Evelyn was left to her own company, her only companions the memories of laughter, family dinners, and holidays gone by. For her 80th birthday, Evelyn had prepared with great care, hoping her children would finally return. She baked her favorite cake, adorned the dining table with flowers, and even bought gifts for each of her grandchildren. But when the clock struck 7, and the house remained eerily silent, Evelyn realized no one was coming. She sat in her chair, gazing at the flickering candles, her heart heavy with a sadness that words could not express. She blew out the candles alone, her silent wish echoing in the empty room. It was a moment that marked the end of something, perhaps her hope, perhaps her faith in the love of her children. Little did anyone know that Evelyn had been planning her final move long before that fateful birthday. She had a surprise in store that would bring her children back together, one way or another. After Evelyn's birthday, her health began to decline rapidly. She had always been a woman of strong constitution, but the weight of loneliness had taken its toll. Catherine, Edward, and Sarah barely noticed. Catherine was swamped with work, her marriage crumbling under the strain of her career. Edward had just landed a promotion and was consumed by the demands of his new role. Sarah, as always, was somewhere unreachable, exploring an art residency in a remote village. None of them realized that their mother was slipping away. One day, a neighbor, Mrs. Parker, found Evelyn unconscious in her home. She called an ambulance, but it was too late. Evelyn passed away quietly in her sleep. News of her death reached the children quickly, but for them, it was an inconvenience rather than a tragedy. Catherine postponed a meeting, Edward booked a flight begrudgingly, and Sarah, after several attempts to reach her, finally responded that she would come. When they gathered in the small village for the funeral, the air was thick with tension. The siblings hadn't been in the same room for years, and their strained relationships only added to the discomfort. Catherine criticized Sarah for her erratic lifestyle, while Edward remained distant, focused on his phone even as they stood by their mother's casket. There were no tears, no heartfelt goodbyes. It was a brief, formal service. Evelyn's will, however, was a different matter. The reading of the will was held in the very house where Evelyn had spent her final days. Her lawyer, Mr. Andrews, was an old family friend, and he gathered the children in the living room where they had once played as children. The mood was somber but cold, none of the siblings expecting much. They assumed their mother had little to leave behind. As Mr. Andrews began to read, the will started off predictably, some small trinkets, personal belongings, and the house itself, which was to be sold and the proceeds divided equally among the children. But then came the surprise. "There is, however, one condition," Mr. Andrews said, glancing at the siblings with a solemn expression. "Your mother has left behind a special inheritance, one that will only be revealed if you fulfill her final request." The siblings exchanged confused glances. "What kind of request?" Edward asked, impatient. "She has asked that each of you spend 3 months living together in this house," Mr. Andrews explained. "No contact with the outside world, no leaving the property. Only then will you learn the true contents of her will." Catherine scoffed. "This is absurd." Sarah, surprisingly, was intrigued. "Maybe we should consider it." Edward was outraged. "I don't have time for this. I have a job, a life." But Mr. Andrews remained firm. "Those are your mother's terms. If you refuse, the rest of the inheritance will be donated to charity." The room fell silent. None of them could afford to walk away from the possibility of what their mother had left behind. Reluctantly, they agreed. The first few weeks were tense, to say the least. Catherine buried herself in books and paperwork, trying to keep herself occupied. Edward paced the house, frustrated by the lack of communication with the outside world. Sarah, always the free spirit, seemed the least bothered, though even she found the isolation challenging. As time passed, however, they began to uncover things about the house, and about their mother, that they had never known. Letters hidden in drawers, journals filled with thoughts and dreams they never knew Evelyn had. They learned of her loneliness, her heartache, and her undying love for them, despite their absence. One evening, they found a locked chest in the attic. Inside were photographs, keepsakes, and letters addressed to each of them. Evelyn had written them over the years, never sending them, but pouring her heart into every word. It was a painful realization for all of them. They had abandoned her, but she had never stopped loving them. The house seemed to take on a life of its own as the siblings began to open up to each other. Old resentments surfaced, and long-buried conflicts were aired. Catherine confessed her struggles with balancing her career and family, admitting that she had always felt like she had to be perfect. Edward revealed his deep-seated insecurity, feeling like he was never good enough in the shadow of his older sister's success. Sarah, for the first time, shared her fear of settling down, of losing herself in the expectations of others. The arguments were fierce, but they were necessary. For the first time in years, they were truly communicating, breaking down the walls they had built between them. As the months went on, the siblings found a new rhythm. They cooked meals together, reminisced about their childhood, and slowly began to heal the wounds of the past. The house, once a symbol of their estrangement, became a place of reconciliation. On the last day of the 3rd month, Mr. Andrews returned to the house. The siblings had fulfilled their mother's request, and now it was time to learn the truth. Mr. Andrews handed them a sealed envelope, inside of which was a final letter from Evelyn. "My dearest children," it began, "I never asked for perfection. I only ever wanted your love, the same love I gave to each of you. I knew, as the years passed, that life would pull you away, that you would grow into your own worlds. But I hoped, in my heart, that you would always find your way back to each other." The letter went on to explain that the real inheritance wasn't money or property, but the bond they had rebuilt over the past 3 months. Evelyn had known that forcing them to live together would be the only way to heal the rifts between them. In a final twist, the letter revealed that the house itself would not be sold. Instead, it was to remain in the family, a place for future generations to come together, just as they had. Catherine, Edward, and Sarah stood in silence after reading the letter. The realization of what their mother had done hit them all at once. She had given them the greatest gift of all, each other. For the first time in years, they felt like a family again. And though Evelyn was gone, her presence lingered in the house, in the memories they had shared, and in the love she had left behind. In the end, it wasn't the will or the inheritance that mattered. It was the lesson their mother had taught them: family, above all else, is the greatest gift. As they walked out of the house together, they knew that they would never let each other go again. Evelyn's plan had worked, and her children had finally come home. The end.